Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Peeling Back the Onion, slicing through this week's satirical headlines. I'm Sarah, your former political journalist turned satirical news aficionado.
And I'm Derek, pop culture enthusiast and social media expert, here to bring you the freshest takes on the Onion's latest and greatest.
Don't forget about me. I'm Olivia, your resident comedy writer and voice impersonator extraordinaire.
Today, we've got a smorgasbord of satirical delights from the Onion, covering everything from politics to sports, and even some local news absurdities. Are you two ready to dive in?
Ready as I'll ever be, Sarah. Though I must say, I'm a little disappointed we don't have any actual onions to peel today.
Oui. The onions, they make me cry with laughter.
All right, let's save some of that comedy for the actual headlines. Let's kick things off with our political satire segment, and boy, do we have a doozy to start with.
Hit us with it, Sarah.
The headline reads, Trump forced to play glockenspiel at rally after every artist bars use of songs.
Not the glockenspiel. Anything but the glockenspiel.
I'm sorry, but I have to ask, what exactly is a glockenspiel?
Well, Derek, a glockenspiel is a percussion instrument with a series of metal bars, similar to a xylophone. It's often used in orchestras and marching bands.
Folks, we have the best glockenspiels. Nobody plays the glockenspiel better than me. It's true.
Oh, Olivia, that's spot on, but let's break this down a bit. This headline is actually poking fun at a real issue Trump has faced in the past. Many artists have indeed requested that he stop using their music at his rallies.
That's right. I remember reading about that. Artists like Rihanna, Pharrell Williams, and even the Rolling Stones have asked Trump to stop using their music.
Exactly. The Onion has taken this real-life situation and pushed it to an absurd extreme, imagining a scenario where Trump has literally no music left to use, except a glockenspiel.
I can just picture it now, Trump standing at the podium, awkwardly tapping out "Hail to the Chief" on a tiny glockenspiel.
Now that's an image I won't be able to get out of my head. But seriously, this headline really highlights the ongoing tension between political figures and artists, doesn't it?
Absolutely, Derek. It's a clever way of commenting on the intersection of politics, intellectual property, and artistic expression. The exaggeration serves to emphasize just how many artists have spoken out against Trump's use of their music.
Listen, Donald, baby. The glockenspiel is so hot right now. It's going to be huge.
All right, let's move on to our next political headline before Olivia gives us a full glockenspiel concert. The next one reads, Biden rushed into surgery after eating sock.
Oh no, not the sock eating incident we've all been dreading.
Come on, man. That sock looked delicious.
Okay, let's unpack this one. Obviously, Biden hasn't actually eaten a sock.
Are we sure about that, Sarah? I mean, stranger things have happened in politics.
Yes, Derek, I'm quite sure. This headline is playing on a couple of things. First, there's the ongoing discussion about Biden's age and health.
Back in my day, we ate socks for breakfast and we liked it.
Thank you, Olivia. As I was saying, this headline plays on concerns about Biden's health, but it does so in an absurdist way. It's also poking fun at the sometimes chaotic nature of White House news cycles.
You're right, Sarah. It seems like every day there's some new crisis or unexpected event coming out of Washington. The idea of the president suddenly eating a sock and needing surgery is just ridiculous enough to almost seem plausible in today's political climate.
Exactly, Derek. The Onion is using this absurd scenario to comment on the frenetic pace of political news and the public's appetite for sensational stories.
Breaking news. President Biden has successfully been separated from the sock. Doctors report that both the president and the sock are in stable condition.
Thank you for that update, Olivia. Now, let's move on to our next political headline. Eric Adams indicted on federal corruption charges.
Wait a minute, Sarah. That doesn't sound like satire. Isn't that actually happening?
You're right to be confused, Derek. This headline is from The Onion's American Voices section, where there's a real news event and then add fictitious man-on-the-street responses. In this case, the indictment of New York City Mayor Eric Adams on federal corruption charges is indeed a real event.
Corruption in New York politics? Forget about it.
So, The Onion is using this real event as a jumping-off point for satire. That's pretty clever.
Exactly. It's a great example of how satire often blurs the line between reality and fiction. The Onion is taking a real serious news story and using it as a framework to comment on public reactions to political corruption.
It's kind of scary how often The Onion's headlines end up being not too far from reality.
What if The Onion isn't writing satire at all? What if they're actually reporting from the future?
I think we might be veering into conspiracy theory territory there, Olivia. But you're not wrong about The Onion sometimes seeming prophetic. It's because good satire is often rooted in keen observation of current trends and issues.
Speaking of current trends, should we move on to the entertainment section? I've got some juicy headlines here.
Absolutely, Derek. Take it away.
All right. First up in entertainment news, we have PBS already had Maggie Smith marathon scheduled for today.
What is a weekend?
Oh, that's perfect, Olivia. For those who might not know, Maggie Smith is a legendary British actress, perhaps best known in recent years for her role as the Dowager Countess in Downton Abbey.
That's right, Sarah. And this headline is playing on the idea that PBS, known for its British drama imports, might be so predictable in its programming that it would coincidentally have a Maggie Smith marathon scheduled on a day when she's in the news.
My dear, if we only had drama when we were in the news, we'd never have any drama at all.
The headline is also a subtle commentary on how certain actors become so associated with a particular network or type of programming. In this case, it's the association between Maggie Smith, British dramas, and PBS.
Exactly. It's a clever way of poking fun at programming trends and viewer expectations. Now, let's move on to our next entertainment headline. What to know about the Golden Bachelorette.
This season on The Golden Bachelorette, love has no age limit.
Oh my, I can already picture the promos. But Derek, fill us in. Is this a real show, or is The Onion just getting creative?
Well, Sarah, while The Golden Bachelorette isn't a real show yet, it's not too far from reality. ABC has actually announced a spin-off called The Golden Bachelor, featuring a senior citizen as the lead.
So once again, The Onion is taking a real trend and pushing it just a step further for comedic effect.
Back in my day, we didn't need a TV show to find love. We just went to the sock hop and hoped for the best.
The headline is definitely playing on the seemingly endless proliferation of dating shows and Bachelor franchise spin-offs. It's also commenting on the entertainment industry's recent efforts to be more inclusive of older demographics.
That's a great point, Derek. It's satirizing both the reality TV trend and society's evolving views on romance and aging. Now, what's our next entertainment headline?
This one's a doozy. Most shocking takeaways from HBO's new Sopranos documentary.
Forget about it. You'll never believe what Tony was really eating in that last scene.
Oh, The Onion is having fun with this one. The Sopranos ended over 15 years ago, but it's still a cultural touchstone that people love to analyze and discuss.
Absolutely, Sarah. This headline is playing on a few things. The enduring popularity of The Sopranos, the trend of documentaries that promise to reveal new information about beloved pop culture properties, and the clickbait nature of many entertainment news articles.
But the real shocking takeaway was the friends we made along the way.
The Onion is definitely poking fun at how these types of documentaries often promise earth-shattering revelations, but often just rehash known information or provide trivial details.
Exactly. It's a commentary on our cultural obsession with behind-the-scenes information and the way media outlets often oversell the importance of new revelations about old TV shows and movies.
Great analysis, Derek. What's our last entertainment headline?
This one's my favorite. Horrified Taylor Swift realizes football happens every year.
Wait, you mean I have to write a new song about football every year?
Oh, this is brilliant. It's playing on the recent media frenzy around Taylor Swift's relationship with Kansas City Chiefs player Travis Kelce.
Exactly, Sarah. The headline is imagining Swift, who's recently been attending NFL games to support Kelce, suddenly realizing that football is an annual occurrence, not just a one-time thing.
I was ready for it, but I wasn't ready for all of it.
It's a clever way of commenting on the collision of pop culture and sports worlds, as well as the sometimes overzealous media coverage of celebrity relationships.
Absolutely. It's also poking fun at the idea of celebrities being out of touch with normal things, like the regular sports schedule.
Great point, Derek. This headline manages to touch on celebrity culture, sports, and media trends all at once. That's The Onion at its best.
Speaking of sports, should we move on to our sports corner?
Absolutely, Derek. What have you got for us?
All right. First up in sports news, Steven Nedorosik under fire after video shows him whipping pommel horse.
In a shocking turn of events, the pommel horse has filed for a restraining order.
Okay, let's break this down. Steven Nedoroscik is a real gymnast, known for his pommel horse routines. The pommel horse, for those who might not know, is that gymnastics apparatus that looks like a horse with handles.
That's right, Sarah. This headline is playing with the idea of taking a common sports phrase, whipping an inanimate object, and interpreting it literally for comedic effect.
Exactly. In gymnastics, whipping the pommel horse would usually mean performing an impressive routine. But The Onion has twisted this to suggest actual animal cruelty, which is obviously absurd when we're talking about a piece of equipment.
Pommel horses are horses too. End the abuse now.
It's also a commentary on how quickly athletes can come under fire in today's social media age, often for misunderstandings or out-of-context actions.
Great point, Derek. This headline manages to combine wordplay, sports jargon, and a nod to contemporary cancel culture all in one go. What's our next sports headline?
This one's a classic. MLB loses millions of stats. In warehouse fire?
Oh, the humanity. We'll never know how many times Babe Ruth scratched his nose during the 1927 season.
Oh, this is fantastic. It's playing on baseball's famous obsession with statistics and record keeping.
Absolutely, Sarah. Baseball is known for tracking an incredible number of stats, some of which seem almost comically specific to casual fans.
The idea of these stats being stored in a physical warehouse is delightfully old-fashioned, especially in our digital age. It's almost like The Onion is imagining baseball's statistical record as a vast library of ancient scrolls.
The case of the missing ERA. It was a hot day in July when I got the call.
It's also a clever commentary on how seriously baseball takes its history and records. The idea of losing these stats is treated like a major catastrophe.
Exactly. It's poking fun at the sport's reverence for numbers and historical data. All right, what's our last sports headline?
Here's a good one. MLB reminds White Sox that game's televised.
Wait, you mean people can see us when we're playing? I thought this was just really elaborate practice.
Oh, this is brutal. For those who might not follow baseball closely, the Chicago White Sox have been having a pretty rough season.
That's putting it mildly, Sarah. As of late September, they're sitting at the bottom of their division with one of the worst records in the league.
This headline is essentially suggesting that the White Sox are playing so badly, they must have forgotten that people are actually watching the games.
Have you tried, winning? I hear that's good for ratings.
It's a clever way of commenting on the team's poor performance, while also poking fun at the pressure of media exposure in professional sports.
Absolutely. It's also playing with the idea of shame as a motivator, as if reminding the team that they're on TV will somehow improve their performance.
And it's a nod to how in today's media landscape, there's really nowhere to hide for struggling sports teams. Every game, every play is analyzed and criticized.
Great point, Derek. This headline manages to comment on sports performance, media pressure, and the sometimes absurd logic of sports management all at once. That wraps up our sports corner for today. Shall we move on to the local news absurdities?
Oh, please, can we? Local news is where the real comedy gold is.
All right, Olivia. Since you're so excited, why don't you lead us through the local news headlines?
With pleasure. First up, we have Hitman opens guitar case concealing guitar he going to beat target's ass with.
Wait, isn't the guitar supposed to be concealing the hitman's weapon, not BE the weapon?
Oh, this is classic Onion. It's taking the trope of a hitman with a guitar case full of weapons and turning it completely on its head.
They'll never see it coming. I'm gonna rock their world. Literally.
It's also playing with the idea of subverting expectations. In movies, the guitar case always contains guns or other weapons, never an actual guitar.
Exactly. And the image of someone trying to use a guitar as a weapon is just inherently funny. It's taking something associated with music and art and turning it into an instrument of violence, quite literally.
Sir, we're going to need you to step away from the Gibson. It's considered a deadly weapon in the wrong hands.
This headline is also a great example of the Onion's skill with language. The awkward phrasing of he going to beat target's ass with adds to the comedic effect.
Good point, Sarah. It almost sounds like something someone would say in the heat of the moment, which adds to the absurdist humor of the situation.
Absolutely. All right, Olivia, what's our next local news headline?
This one's short but sweet. Food used as napkin.
Well, I never. How uncouth.
This headline is brilliant in its simplicity. It's taking a common faux pas and elevating it to the level of news.
Breaking news. Local man wipes mouth with slice of bread. More at 11.
It's funny because it's something we've probably all done at some point, but seeing it presented as a news headline makes it seem absurd.
Exactly, Derek. It's also a commentary on the sometimes trivial nature of local news stories. In a world of serious issues, the idea that someone using food as a napkin would make the news is pretty ridiculous.
Remember, darlings, the soup spoon is for soup, the salad fork is for salad, and the dinner roll is absolutely not for dabbing the corners of your mouth.
It's also playing with the idea of social norms and etiquette. Using food as a napkin is generally considered bad manners, so presenting it as news is a way of exaggerating its social importance.
And in a way, it's also commenting on food waste. In a world where we're increasingly conscious of not wasting food, using it as a napkin seems particularly egregious.
Great point, Derek. This simple headline manages to touch on social norms, media priorities, and even environmental concerns. That's The Onion at its best. What's our next local headline, Olivia?
Here's a good one. Man becomes first in his family to go to bed.
What a trailblazer. Someone get this man a medal.
Oh, this is fantastic. It's playing on the common phrase, first in the family to go to college, but applying it to something completely mundane.
We always knew little Timmy would be the one to break the cycle of insomnia in our family. We're so proud.
It's a clever way of poking fun at the way we celebrate firsts in families, especially when it comes to education or career achievements.
Absolutely, Derek. It's taking the language and tone we usually reserve for significant accomplishments and applying it to something as simple as going to bed.
This groundbreaking achievement could revolutionize the field of family sleep dynamics. We're looking at a paradigm shift in bedtime studies.
It's also a subtle commentary on our society's weird relationship with sleep. We often treat getting enough sleep as some kind of achievement, rather than a basic necessity.
Good point, Sarah. In our always-on, productivity-obsessed culture, sometimes just going to bed at a reasonable hour can feel like a major accomplishment.
Exactly. This headline manages to comment on family dynamics, societal expectations, and our cultural attitude towards sleep all at once. That's pretty impressive for just 9 words.
Should I move on to our last local news headline?
Absolutely, Olivia. What have you got for us?
All right, here's our final local news absurdity. Yoga teacher puts hand on small of student's back, but in parking lot.
Wait, isn't that just assault?
Oh my, The Onion is really pushing boundaries with this one. Let's unpack it a bit.
Now, let's all take a deep breath and reach for our car keys. Feel the asphalt beneath your feet. Become one with the parking lot.
This headline is playing with the common yoga instruction of a teacher adjusting a student's pose by touching their back. But by moving this action to a parking lot, it completely changes the context and implications.
It's also commenting on the sometimes blurry lines between appropriate and inappropriate touching in fitness or wellness settings.
Absolutely, Derek. In a yoga studio, this action might be perfectly normal and expected, but in a parking lot, it becomes weird and potentially threatening.
I knew that parking lot yoga class sounded too good to be true.
It's a clever way of highlighting how context can completely change the meaning of an action. It's also poking fun at the trend of taking yoga out of the studio and into unexpected locations.
And in a way, it's commenting on the sometimes cult-like devotion some people have to their fitness routines. Like, oh, class is over? No problem. We'll just continue in the parking lot.
Great point, Derek. This headline manages to touch on issues of personal space, fitness trends, and the importance of context all at once. It's a great example of how The Onion can take a simple scenario and load it with multiple layers of meaning and humor.
And that concludes our local news roundup. Remember, folks, keep your yoga in the studio and your napkins off your plate.
Thank you, Olivia. Now, we've covered quite a lot of ground today, from political satire to sports jokes to local news absurdities. But before we wrap up, let's quickly go through some of the other headlines we didn't have time to dive into deeply.
Sounds good, Sarah. Should we do a rapid-fire round?
Absolutely, Derek. Let's do it. I'll read out the headline and you two give me your quickest, funniest reaction. Ready?
Ready?
All right, here we go. Moodang worried, chubbier, feistier pygmy hippo coming to take this all away.
Move over, Moodang. There's a new thick boy in town.
Hippo imposter syndrome is real, folks.
Botox misses fact.
Fact. It doesn't actually turn you into a robot.
OMG, you mean it doesn't actually put botulism in my face? Bummer.
Archangel hangs around after delivering message, hoping for tip.
Divine intervention ain't free, you know.
I guess even celestial beings have to deal with the gig economy.
Panicked Eric Adams takes City Hall employees hostage.
Well, that's one way to boost office morale.
Listen up, folks. Nobody leaves until we figure out how to make the subway run on time.
Woman reaches arm deep into purse like farmer artificially inseminating cow.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why we need smaller purses.
Just a little deeper. I think I feel my keys.
Oh my, these are fantastic. The Onion really outdid themselves this week. Now, as we wrap up, let's reflect on what we've covered today. We've seen how The Onion uses satire to comment on everything from high-level politics to everyday annoyances.
Absolutely, Sarah. I think what stands out to me is how The Onion manages to find humor in such a wide range of topics. They can go from making fun of Trump and Biden to joking about someone using food as a napkin, and it all works.
And let's not forget how they blend real news with absurdist humor. That Eric Adams headline is a perfect example of how they can take a serious news story and find a way to make it funny without diminishing its importance.
Great points, both of you. I think what makes The Onion so effective is their ability to use humor to highlight truths about our society, our politics, and ourselves. Even their most absurd headlines often have a kernel of truth or social commentary at their core.
Definitely. And it's a great reminder not to take everything we read at face value. In an era of fake news and misinformation, The Onion's brand of obvious satire is almost refreshing in its transparency.
In a world of real fake news, sometimes fake news is the realest news of all.
Well said, Olivia. On that deep note, I think it's time to wrap up this episode of Peeling Back the Onion. Thank you both for your insights and humor today.
Thanks, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to dissect The Onion with you two.
Tune in next week when we'll be asking the age-old question, is it satire or is it just Florida?
And with that, we'll say goodbye. Remember, listeners, in a world that often seems absurd, sometimes laughter is the best way to make sense of it all. Until next time, keep peeling back those layers of satire.
Bye, everyone.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope you enjoyed that brief musical interlude. Now let's dive into some of the headlines we didn't have time to cover earlier.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this part. The Onion always has so many great headlines. It's hard to pick just a few to discuss in depth.
Well, what are we waiting for? Let's peel back some more layers.
All right, let's start with this one. Timeline of book bans in the U.S.
Oh, this is a touchy subject. The Onion's really diving into some controversial waters here.
First they came for green eggs and ham, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Dr. Seuss character.
While that's funny, Olivia, book bans are actually a serious issue. The Onion is using satire here to draw attention to the ongoing debates about censorship and intellectual freedom in our country.
Absolutely. It's interesting how they're framing it as a timeline. I wonder what kind of absurd milestones they've included.
Well, knowing The Onion, they've probably mixed some real historical events with completely ridiculous fictional ones. It's a clever way to highlight how some current book bans might seem just as absurd to future generations.
And in 2024, they tried to ban books about shapes because they were too political.
You joke, but sometimes reality isn't too far off from that.
That's true, Derek. And that's part of what makes The Onion's satire so effective. They take real trends and issues and push them just a little further into the realm of absurdity.
Speaking of absurdity, what's our next headline, Sarah?
Here's a good one. Monster truck rally attendees angrily boo regular-sized truck.
What is this? A truck for ants?
Oh, I can just picture it. A normal pickup truck rolls out and the whole crowd goes silent before erupting in boos.
It's a brilliant play on expectations. The Onion is taking the over-the-top nature of monster truck rallies and contrasting it with something completely mundane.
And now, entering the arena, Dave's 2010 Toyota Tacoma.
Boo-woo. Where are the flames? Where's the crushing?
It's also a commentary on how we often crave spectacle and excess in our entertainment. The idea that a regular truck would be disappointing to monster truck fans is both funny and a little bit true.
And it's not just monster trucks, is it? We see this in all sorts of entertainment, bigger explosions in movies, more outrageous stunts in live shows.
The problem with your script is that the trucks aren't big enough. Can we make them the size of buildings? And also, they should be able to fly.
Exactly. The Onion is using this absurd scenario to comment on our culture's constant need for bigger, louder, more extreme forms of entertainment.
It's pretty clever how they can pack so much commentary into such a short headline.
That's what makes The Onion so brilliant. Now let's move on to our next headline. Ohtani cashes in 50 home run futures bet ticket.
Oh, this is a good one. For those who might not know, Shohei Ohtani is a baseball player for the Los Angeles Angels, and he's known for being exceptionally good at both pitching and hitting.
I bet on myself, and myself did not disappoint.
This headline is playing with the idea of insider trading, but in a sports context. It's suggesting that Ohtani bet on himself to hit 50 home runs in a season.
Which, if it were true, would be a major scandal in baseball. Players aren't allowed to bet on games, let alone on their own performance.
But what if he's from the future and just knew it was going to happen?
I think we're venturing into science fiction territory now, Olivia. But this headline does touch on some interesting themes. The intersection of sports and gambling, the idea of athletes having inside information, and the sometimes blurry ethical lines in professional sports.
It's also a nod to how exceptional Ohtani is as a player. The idea that he could confidently bet on hitting 50 home runs speaks to his incredible skill.
Absolutely. The Onion is using this absurd scenario to highlight Ohtani's talents while also poking fun at the world of sports betting and the constant search for an edge in gambling.
Next up, will Ohtani pitch a perfect game while simultaneously hitting for the cycle? Odds are 1,000 to 1.
All right, let's move on to our next headline before Olivia starts taking bets. Here's an interesting one. Physical therapy office politely declines Daniel Jones' offer of framed signed jersey for Wall.
Oh, ouch. That's a brutal burn on Daniel Jones.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jones, but we only have room for jerseys from players who don't cause injuries?
For those who might not follow football closely, Daniel Jones is the quarterback for the New York Giants, and he's had some injury troubles recently.
That's right, Sarah. This headline is suggesting that Jones is such a frequent visitor to physical therapy that they don't even want his jersey as a memento.
It's a clever way of commenting on Jones's injury history and the Giants' struggles as a team. The Onion is imagining a scenario where even a professional athlete's memorabilia isn't wanted.
But guys, I even personalized it. To my favorite physical therapists, thanks for putting me back together. Again.
It's also playing with the idea of celebrity and status. Usually, a signed jersey from an NFL quarterback would be considered a prized possession.
Exactly, Derek. By having the physical therapy office decline the jersey, The Onion is subverting that expectation and suggesting that Jones's injuries have become so frequent that even his memorabilia is more of a burden than a gift.
It's a pretty harsh commentary on Jones's career so far, isn't it?
It certainly is, Derek, but that's often how The Onion operates. They take real-world situations and push them to an absurd extreme to make a point.
In other news, the Giants' offensive line has offered to donate their jerseys to a local construction company as caution. Hole-ahead signs.
All right, let's move on to our next headline before we completely destroy Daniel Jones's career. Here's an interesting one. MLB loses millions of stats in warehouse fire.
Wait, didn't we cover this one earlier?
You're right, Derek. We did discuss this headline earlier, but I think it's worth revisiting because there's so much to unpack here.
The horror. We've lost decades of data on how many times a left-handed batter has hit a foul ball on a 2-2 count during a day game in August.
You joke, Olivia. But I wouldn't be surprised if baseball actually kept track of that kind of hyper-specific stat.
That's exactly what makes this headline so funny. Baseball is famous for its obsession with statistics, some of which can seem incredibly obscure to casual fans.
And the idea of all these stats being stored in a physical warehouse is just delightfully old-fashioned, isn't it?
Absolutely. In our digital age, the image of a warehouse full of baseball statistics on paper is almost quaint. It's as if The Onion is imagining baseball's statistical records as some vast library of ancient scrolls.
The case of the missing ERA. It was a hot day in July when I got the call.
You know, Olivia, you might be onto something there. This headline does have a bit of a noir mystery feel to it.
It's also a commentary on how seriously baseball takes its history and records, isn't it? The idea of losing these stats is treated like a major catastrophe.
Exactly, Derek. It's poking fun at the sport's reverence for numbers and historical data. But it's also touching on a real concern in the digital age. the potential loss of important information due to unforeseen events.
Have you tried turning the warehouse off and on again?
If only it were that simple. Now let's move on to our final headline for today. MLB reminds White Sox that games televised.
Oh, this is brutal. The poor White Sox can't catch a break.
Wait, you mean people can see us when we're playing? I thought this was just really elaborate practice.
For those who might not follow baseball closely, the Chicago White Sox have been having a pretty rough season.
That's putting it mildly, Sarah. As of late September, they're sitting at the bottom of their division with one of the worst records in the league.
This headline is essentially suggesting that the White Sox are playing so badly, they must have forgotten that people are actually watching the games.
Have you tried, winning? I hear that's good for ratings.
It's a clever way of commenting on the team's poor performance, while also poking fun at the pressure of media exposure in professional sports.
Absolutely. It's also playing with the idea of shame as a motivator, as if reminding the team that they're on TV will somehow improve their performance.
And it's a nod to how in today's media landscape, there's really nowhere to hide for struggling sports teams. Every game, every play is analyzed and criticized.
Great point, Derek. This headline manages to comment on sports performance, media pressure, and the sometimes absurd logic of sports management all at once.
Maybe if we play really, really quietly, no one will notice us losing.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this extended edition of Peeling Back the Onion. We've covered a lot of ground today, from political satire to sports jokes to local news absurdities.
It's amazing how much commentary The Onion can pack into these short headlines, isn't it?
Absolutely, Derek. That's what makes The Onion so brilliant. They have this incredible ability to distill complex issues and cultural trends into these bite-sized pieces of satire.
We plant the seeds of satire, water them with absurdity, and harvest a crop of laughter and insight.
Well said, Olivia. I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you both for your insights and humor today.
Thanks, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to dissect The Onion with you too.
Tune in next week when we'll be asking the age-old question. Is it satire, or is it just Florida?
And with that, we'll say goodbye. Remember, listeners, in a world that often seems absurd, sometimes laughter is the best way to make sense of it all. Until next time, keep peeling back those layers of satire.
Bye, everyone.